Well, if we start yelling and screaming at our spouses or our children, who is it that feels the brunt of that? Kids. Kids are around, and instead of playing and instead of learning, which are really their two jobs, they're now troubled by anxiety and angst because of the things that are happening at home. And so, how does that manifest itself? Well, then they can't concentrate, they can't do things in schoolwork, um, and they start being snatched by all sorts of other things that are out there in the world that promise them that sense of value that they nourish and that they hope. And so we see in our communities today so many kids that are being snatched into different gang affiliations and just different things that are so toxic to their well-being. So at Family Bridges, we focus on what do we do? How do we help equip families to figure out how to deal with all these toxic emotions and how to deal with the tension and how to cope through and deal with the conflict and push through and then flourish in the midst of challenging situations. And so we've actually, through 15 years, have been figuring out how to do that. And it works. We're actually able to bring a wonderful skill set basis to people through relationship skills training. And so we equip people, we train them and how to love each other well, how to parent each other well, how to understand their finances. We equip leaders in the communities to do that. And then we help communities flourish and thrive. And so through the years, we figured that out and we developed a program called Avance because we wanted to scale that and bring that to even more neighborhoods. And Avance means growth. And it's the idea of having that growth mindset in a family and in a community. And so we partner with churches, non-for-profit organizations, and we enter into a journey for 3 years or more where we equip them in leadership education and be able to train their volunteers to be able to flourish and grow their communities, as well as the parents and the couples and the families and whatever relationship status they are, to be able to encourage them and grow in that journey. Because ultimately, if they're healthy, their kids are going to be healthy. So that's our mission, right? Strong families for purpose-driven children. And so we do that work. It's worked wonderfully. And what's been great is that now we want to scale that and do more of that. And we wanted to make sure that that information that we were imparting had long-term impact. So we embarked on a longitudinal study, not just something that did pre and post, but what would it take for years to see if this actually stuck and if people continue to learn. And we're really excited to see that the outcomes have been fantastic, that parents continue to thrive, they continue to learn, and that then means that the children are experiencing less aggression and being more respectful and being more obedient, if you will, within their households. That couples are learning to talk to each other and then they feel more satisfied and happier. And if they're happier, then the kids are happier. So we're excited about those long-term outcomes. And so now we feel confident to unleash this program, take it to more communities. And in that arena, how do we do that during the COVID-19 season of ambiguity and not knowing what to do? And so one of the things that we're doing is embracing technology and figuring out how to take that enriching platform that we've developed in a way that's more accessible. And so to that end, we've started a journey of doing e-learning and virtual programming and virtual workshops. And we're extremely grateful for a grant we received from CIBC Bank that has afforded us the opportunity to take one of our key capstone programs and convert it in an e-learning platform. And so thankful for CIBC and their grant of $7,000 to unleash us in that. And so that's one example of a business partner that has come alongside as we continue to embrace these programs that are enriching to be able to move forward and grow. So CIBC is a great reminder of how a macro change in organization rallied around this concept and then is able to bring these micro investments that have a phenomenal impact. And so this morning, I'm excited to introduce another partner, Lakeland University's professor, Dr. Scott Niederjohn, who's going to be speaking to us about economics. But he also, with Lakeland, is a great example of an organization that has figured out how to make all the significant changes and invest in the community in order to ripple and make a difference in the lives of families as well as in individuals. What can I tell you? You've seen his bio, but PhD in economics, authored numerous books and articles on labor economics, economic education, public policy. He serves as a professor of Lakeland University in Wisconsin. He also sits in the Governor's Council on Financial Literacy. He's worked on many community groups and organizations to provide economic and financial literacy programs to their members. We benefited from it with Family Bridges, had a chance last summer to be able to go out there and had a group, and it was really enriching experience. He's been married for for 22 years, has a couple kids. I almost said for 2 years, but longer than that. But one of the stories that I resonate a lot with Dr. Niederjohn is when he shared with me that his university was the one that was responsible for this book that I had learned about in a movie in Netflix that we watched it as a family. The movie is called The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. And it's this beautiful movie about this boy who's a child inventor from Malawian, William Cam, maybe Scott can clarify the name. But anyways, he built this windmill to save his village from drought. And he built it by, basically, he would sneak into this school library and learn science. And so he self-taught himself how to build this. Well, in one conversation with Scott, he said that book was actually from the library of Lakeland University as one of the programs that they have in donating books. So I'd love for Scott, yes, to speak to us this morning about economics and how we can just learn amazing skill sets and how to start that growth journey and learn how to make better decisions as a little taste of even how we teach these kinds of skill sets in our programs and are able to grow. But I'd also love for him to maybe share a little bit about that story to give us a glimpse of that program in Lakeland University. So with that, I'll ask Scott to join us and to take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Alicia. It's really it's a pleasure to be here. And like you said, our little tiny liberal arts college in Wisconsin, we're north of Milwaukee, really has had a global reach. We've had a long program with Malawi, Africa, really due to a faculty member who left us for a while and joined the U.S. Foreign Service, and where he was placed was Malawi, Africa. So we helped them through their first democratic election outside of colonialism. In that process, though, in fact, his kids were at one point, the whole school was kidnapped. So he went through a lot of pretty terrible things. But one thing that my colleague always wanted to do once he came back to Wisconsin was give back to the country of Malawi, the very impoverished place. We've done lots and lots of book drives. Usually it's with public schools where the books are too old for the kids in the US, but they would be great for Malawians, otherwise they have almost nothing. And it turns out one of these books was about electricity and how to power light, and that's what, in the movie, that's what this kid found, was that book that helped him figure out how to make a windmill, which helped his parents move some water, to allow them in the drought season to keep growing crops. So it's a pretty amazing story. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to talk a little bit about behavioral economics. Hopefully everybody can see this. And what I'd like to do, I'm going to have a few times where I could use some participation. I think it'll make it more fun for all of us, but we'll use the chat function for that. So I'd like you to, at times, can everybody see this? Is the screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. We're good? Okay. So I'm going to start with a little thought experiment here. This is something you would normally do in person, where we would actually do an activity, but I want you to think about this for a minute. Imagine that I put you into two groups. So half of you would be proposers and half would be responders. The job of the proposer is to imagine a real $100 and decide how to divide it up. So you could keep 80 for yourself and give 20 away. You can do 50-50, 70-30. It's totally up to you, and it's all anonymous, but you'll be proposing this split to a responder. And the responder then, again, anonymously, will either accept it or reject it. If they accept it and it's 50-50, you both get $50 and you'll walk away. Maybe they propose 80-20, and you would get your 80 as a proposer. The responder keeps their 20, they go away. But if the responder were to reject the offer, then both parties get zero. They get nothing. So that's called the ultimatum game. It's been done many, many times. And I'll show you what the results look like, but I want to first ask you to show me what you would do. So if you understand it, again, it's just $100. Imagine it's real pile of cash. If you were the proposer, that is, your job is to divide the money up. Again, anonymously, but you know that if it gets rejected, you get 0, and so does the other person. What would you propose? And if you just use the chat function, actually I gotta figure out how I can see that. If you would just put in, so it could be 50-50, it could be 80-20, it could be 70-30. How would you divide that money up if you were a proposer? Okay, I see 60-40, I see 55-50-50 is common. 50-50, I see a lot of 50-50s, a lot of fair people here. 50-50, okay. Now, imagine that you're the responder. Oh, 80-20, okay. Imagine you're the responder. Now, are there any offers that you would reject? That is, you would say no thank you because whatever the offer would be. So will you put in the chat if there's some number below which you would reject it? Maybe it's $10, maybe it's 20, maybe it's 5. Would you reject any offers? Anything less than 50, I'm seeing, less than 50-50. That's interesting. It's interesting to me because, so here's the most common results. This has been done many, many times. The most common result is that people offer 50-50. It's also true, though, that about 20% of low offers, anything below 50-50, are rejected. And that's kind of strange to an economist because it's kind of saying, I don't want free money, right? You're rejecting it. You're rejecting free money because probably you want to punish the person for giving you something you don't think is fair, right? If you would reject something under 50-50, you're saying, no, thank you, I don't want $40, right? And you're doing that probably because you want to send a signal that you think it's not fair. But that's not the way, if you've studied economics, we normally don't think about things that way. We think a lot about rationality and that really anything's better than 0, right? So you should really accept anything. But my point is, actually, I'm not going to show this video right now, but you might want to Google this later. It's just Google the Capuchin monkey fairness experiment. It turns out monkeys will act the same way. If you give them both cucumbers, they're happy to eat them. But if one monkey sees a different monkey getting a grape instead of a cucumber, he'll literally throw the cucumber back at the researcher. They get mad. They want fairness, right? So if fairness matters, that probably will affect the way some of our economic decisions are made or our financial decisions. So I'm going to talk a little bit about behavioral economics. What it really does is combine economics with finance and psychology. So we're really trying to, I've lost my screen, sorry. Sorry about that. I'm trying to figure out what happened here. Okay, are we back seeing my screen? I lost it, sorry. Can you see my screen, everybody? Okay, I'm sorry. So we're combining economics with psychology and finance, and this proposes, unlike most econ textbooks, what this proposes is that people are often irrational. That is, they might have certain cognitive biases that affect their decisions. So maybe people aren't so much like an econ, if you see my little chart there, that is, they aren't so deliberate or analytical or patient, but maybe they're more like humans, right? Sometimes we are deliberate, but oftentimes we're reflexive or we're emotional or we make quick decisions. If that's all true and we have some biases, it might be helpful to know what they are. So that's what I was going to show you a few of these. So one well-known one is called loss aversion or the endowment effect. There was a movie based on a book that Michael Lewis wrote called Moneyball. It was about the general manager of the Oakland A's, but one famously he says, I hate losing more than I want to win. And that's true of most people. People tend to weigh losses substantially more than gains, like twice as much. So losing something makes you twice as miserable as the happiness from gaining something. Some famous experiments, as you'll see on my chart there, on my slide, if you give half a group, experimental group, a coffee mug, and the other half some cash, and then you ask those who got the mug to value it, what would you sell it for? And you ask those who got the cash, what would you pay for a coffee mug? You tend to find those who got the mug value it twice as much as those who didn't. And the explanation is that they would lose it. If they have to sell it now, it's something they've lost. So losing things makes painful to them. So it's worth more if you already have something. Another study's been done with Duke basketball tickets. Their stadium is very small. They have to allocate tickets based on a lottery. And the kids who win the lottery, when you ask them what would you sell your tickets for, they'll often give unbelievable numbers, $10,000, $5,000, because they value it so much that they've gotten the chance to go. If you ask the kids who didn't get it, again, just a lottery, and they all stayed out overnight trying to get tickets. You ask the ones who didn't get it what they would pay for a ticket now, they'll give you a reasonable answer, a couple $100 maybe, right up to that. So again, the point is that once you have something, losing it is very painful. Would you do me a favor in the chat again? Now look at this little scenario here. I'm going to show you two of them and then ask you to put something in the chat. So imagine that I give you $1,000 and then you can choose one of two options. Either option A is you have a 50-50 chance to win 1,000 more, or option B is you get 500 for sure. So just jot down on a piece of paper or something next to you, would you want A or B in scenario one? Okay. Now, let me show you another scenario here. Let's try this again. This time, I'm going to give you $2,000, and you can choose between options A or B. Either 50-50 chance to lose 1,000, or you lose 500 for sure. So now, would you want option A or option B? So if you could, type in, so make sure you understand these two scenarios, and then type in, would you want A both times, or B both times, or A then B, or B then A? How would you answer these? Let me look at some of the answers here I'm getting. Getting A and B, B and A, B, A, B. So some of you are saying B or A both times. That actually makes sense. If you chose two different answers, that actually doesn't make a lot of sense, because offer A was the same both times. It was a 50-50 chance of getting 1,000 or 2,000, right? And option B was the same both times as well. It was a sure 1,500. How you got there was different, but in both cases, they were the exact same thing. So if you liked A the first time, you should like A the second time. If you like B the first time, you should like B the second time. In both cases, it was no risk, $1,500. Offer A both times, while proposed differently, it was always going to be either 1,000 or 2,000. So, but oftentimes people do choose two different responses, and I see a lot of you did the same thing. It probably has to do with loss aversion. Nobody likes the idea of a sure loss, right? Because you think you already have something. Or if you're worried about gambling, you're worried about the regret of, if you don't get the 1,000. Or sometimes we're just not that good at probability, right? It's hard for us to think through problems like that. But this manifests itself in lots of ways. If you miss a flight at the airport, back when we used to go on trips and fly places, if you miss it by 45 minutes, people say they're pretty sad. If you miss it by 1 minute, they're incredibly sad. But does that make any practical sense? In both cases, you missed a flight. Your life is no different if you missed it by a minute or 45, right? That really is irrational, but you can see why we might feel that way, right? Because you were so close to making it. In my bottom example there, when studies are done, people tend to be happier in the first group. That is, you go from your portfolio, stock portfolio going from 1 million to 1.5 million. They're happier than those whose goes from 3 to 2.5 million. Again, I think we'd all rather have 2.5 to 1.5, right? But if this loss idea is what's painful for people, so it can influence our decisions. And some practical ways they can do that is thinking about investing. For example, we often don't want to sell a loss-making investment. A home's a good example. What you paid for it, though, is really irrational, or is really irrelevant, isn't it? Because that was the price back when you bought it. 10 years later, often people don't want to sell for below what they paid, even if that might be the best decision, right? Because you need to get out of this thing. What it's worth today may be very different, and that number you paid for it really is irrelevant, whether that be a stock or a home, but that's very hard for us to think that way, right? We need to think about sunk cost, though. That is things that we can't get back. What you paid is what you paid, and it's not going to change, right? You don't control that anymore. It's like if you go to a terrible movie, you might as well leave, right? You don't get money back if you leave early, right? If you stay to the end, why waste your time, right? The sunk cost, you've already incurred it, and you can't get it back. So really in investing, we should be thinking mostly about, what's it worth today, not what we paid for something. That's really not something we can control anymore. Another interesting bias is called anchoring, and that really has to do with sometimes we get fixated on one piece of information. Take a look at my example here. This is from The Economist magazine, and they ran this ad, and it probably looks a little bit weird to you because why would anybody buy the second one, right? You can see that if you could just get the magazine online for 59 bucks, or you get print for 125, or you get print and online for 125. That almost seems like a mistake, right? Why would they possibly do that? Because why would anybody buy the middle one? Well, it turns out that you're right. We're right. No one did buy the middle one. This was data from a large-scale study that 16% took A, 84% took C. Nobody wanted B. However, if they removed option B, then things change. Then substantially more people take the first option, A, just online, and much less take option C. They obviously wanted to drive more to C because it costs more. And what did the option B do? It is an anchor. It said, hey, if print's worth 125, what a deal to get print and web for 125. So that anchored in your mind that it's worth 125, and that influences then the way people made decisions later. And that probably explains some things you've experienced, like charity events. They often suggest a donation, right? And the suggestion is that anything below the lowest one would be sort of rude or unacceptable, right? So they're anchoring in your mind what's a reasonable gift. I put an example down below that New York City cabs used to you put in whatever tip you wanted. When they did it that way, their average tip was about 8 or 9%. When they changed their machine to suggest some tips, it went up much higher. Again, psychologists would call that a cognitive bias. That is that we're anchored, certain numbers are anchored in our mind, and we have a hard time separating ourselves from that. So in an obvious way, in investment, one obvious anchor is the price you paid. Price you paid for a share of stock, for example. But you don't want to get yourself in a situation where that anchor influences your decision making, because if things change, there may be times when you need to sell at a loss, right? And that you can't find yourself just tied to that anchor. What you paid for it in the past is really irrelevant for the future, because who knows what's happened since then. There are times when we have to just make a better decision. One last one I thought would be interesting is called default bias. That is, people tend to stick with their initial option. So I'm going to show you two scenarios here. I'm just going to have you read these on your own. So read option one. I'll give you 30 seconds to read that. Okay, then I'm going to show you option two. So they're very similar, you'll see, I think, but they're a little bit different. If someone notices the difference, you can put it into the chat. What makes the second one different than the first one? The second offer, option two. Yeah, that's right. I don't know if that's quite fair to say mandatory and voluntary or forced, but it defaults you in rather than you have to opting in, right? You can always get out, but your default is to opt you in. So interestingly and somewhat famously, this is maybe the best example of where behavioral economics has had a real impact we actually changed federal law that says now that employers may opt employees into the 401k and they have to opt themselves out. By doing that, you can see the numbers, it becomes more people now take advantage of the system because they're opted in and they don't choose to opt themselves out. So Richard Thaler is an economist at Chicago. He wrote a book called Nudge, and he was the one whose research showed this, and then he, through his research, influenced the Congress to change the law that now allows employers to opt you into the retirement plan, and if you want to get out, you have to do that yourself. So he's really had a huge impact on American savings rates. He uses this term nudge to mean a little push in the right direction, right? To do what's probably the right thing for you. So don't force people, we're not going to, can't make them do something, but a nudge is a way to try to help them make a better decision perhaps. So it could be used here in retirement. It could be used to help people recycle or to make better family decisions. So can little nudges help? And I thought I would leave you with, if you think this is interesting, there are some interesting books out there. There's the book called Nudge that Dr. Thaler wrote. But Dan Ariely's at Duke, and he wrote a book called Predictably Irrational. So interestingly, he's saying that we know people aren't always rational, and there are places where we can identify that, like I showed you. So why don't we take advantage of that, right? Try to help them make better decisions. And the other two are just interesting books about either behavioral economics, that one applies it to finance, and the last one is Michael Lewis, who's written many, many books, including, like I mentioned, Moneyball or The Big Short, became a movie. But this one's about the two men who were both Israeli-born psychologists who really founded behavioral economics. Their names were Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman. Daniel Kahneman is still alive at Princeton. So he was the one who really figured a lot of these things out. So that book's a good story about how they really did these experiments and really changed economics in many ways, because our textbooks really used to only talk about always rational decision makers, but we know we don't always act that way, and that's what makes us interesting, I think. So I hope you take from this is that a lot of economics and finance is based around this assumption of human rationality, but behavioral economists question whether that's always true. And there are many implications of this, but we talked about a few of them, like loss aversion, anchoring, and default bias. So I think there are many, many others, but those are three interesting ones that can have both financial impacts, but also I think family impacts on the choices you make with your own either resources or decision making. So that's what I had for you. I'm happy to take some questions in the chat if you'd like, and hopefully I can answer them. And I'm also happy to, what I'll also do, I think, is to share this PowerPoint with the Family Bridges team so they could make it available to you guys if you want to look at it yourself. I'm sure some of the things went kind of fast, and or maybe you want to see my resources. So I would check that video out, though. It's pretty funny, and it also makes a great point that even animals don't like to be treated what they perceive to be unfairly, right? And if that's true again, that really does influence the way we make decisions. So I'm just looking at the chat. I haven't seen, do I see a question here? Somebody asked, how can you improve the financial decisions affecting you and your company? Well, that's what you guys are going to talk about next, I think, right? So that tees it up well, good. Well, thank you very much. And I'll also put my email address in here. So if anybody wants to contact me about other questions or something else, I'm happy to engage that way too. So
I'm going to interrupt you. There's a quick, interesting question here that says, does the psychology of this decision-making change when you get married or have children?
Well, I think for sure it does, right? I think people often become more risk averse, for example, right? Or they've got, other things that they're thinking about. Alicia mentioned that I've married 22 years. We got 4 children. In fact, we've been running a home with 4 different online schools because they're all in different schools. My oldest son had to come home from college. He goes to Xavier in Cincinnati, and then a high school senior and a high school sophomore, and then a 7th grader. But clearly, when you've got children, then you've got to think about their well-being as well. So I think sometimes that affects the risk you're willing to take. It may affect long-term planning, right, and trying to make decisions in the best interests of them. So I think certainly there's no doubt about that. And I think the research has shown that. But it also shows that people who are married are often healthier, happier, and certainly wealthier. Because in the economics term, getting married allows you to specialize, right? You don't have to do everything. You can do what you're good at it, your spouse can do what they're good at it, and you can work together, right? I like cooking, I can do that. So my wife can not spend time on that and do something else, right? So there's actually some productivity gains. We don't usually think about love that way, right? But I think by becoming a family, you can also specialize in trade much like you do in a business or in an economy. So.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Niederjohn. I don't see any other questions. Oh, hold on. I think there is one more question.
I'm gonna stop sharing.
From Carlos Garcia.
How would econ deal with the pressure ring effect? Yeah, no, that's a great question from Carlos, right? So then that's exactly what the behavioral economists spend a lot of time looking at. So he asked about pressure to make quick decisions. And one thing they find is that humans aren't great at probability theory. Well, why would we be, right? Most people try to avoid statistics and that kind of thing. So we often don't judge the likelihood of events very well and then make poor decisions that way, especially when you have to do it quickly, right? I think that's true why you don't want to do things, like big decisions like buying cars or homes quickly, right? Because we can be influenced by emotion, right? Or just something we really want right now. But I think trying to take some time to think through those things and do some research really helps. But you're absolutely right. That was actually one of the key findings, was when they asked people to do quick puzzles or to do quick decision-making situations, it often is people really break down and have a lot of trouble, especially when there's a little bit of math involved, particularly when there's thinking about likelihoods, right? Just not a natural thing for us to be good at. You have to kind of study that to understand it well. All right, well, thanks everybody. I know we're on a tight timeline and I'm supposed to respect that, so I'm going to do that. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was a great presentation, so insightful. I'm definitely going to watch that video, The Monkeys in Fairness, and get those books. So it is time to discuss what we just heard. So we're going to break you up into rooms again. And if hopefully, we won't have that many issues as before. But now we're going to discuss the question, in view of what we just heard, how can you improve the financial decisions affecting you or your company? So what we're going to do is we're going to add that question on the chat so that you don't have to remember it. You can just read it. And we're going to come back in 12 minutes. So on the agenda next, we have a testimonial from a gentleman who has participated in several Family Bridges workshops with his wife, Veronica. And they've been doing this through our wonderful partner organization, St. John Paul, the Second Church in Kankakee. He's going to share the impact that Family Bridges has had on his marriage and the family. So it is my pleasure to introduce Victor Rosales, coming to us live from Kankakee. Victor, you cannot mute yourself. Unmute yourself and then share.
Ok, gracias. Bueno, mi nombre es Víctor Rosales, ya como me presentaron, casado por, well, my name is Victor Rosales, sorry, and I'm 43 years old, married for 23 years, and we have 5 kids, and we have the privilege of being a participant from more than one of the family workshops. Before the privilege of being a participant of Family Bridges workshop, I was in a very, very bad financial situations. And it was so bad that I have to file for bankruptcy. And we lost a lot of money. I lost confidence. I was feeling so bad with this situation, emotional and spiritual. It was between my wife and myself, it was impossible talking about money. That was something that it was no conversation about it because we didn't know how to talk about money. During we have the invitation through our community church in Kankakee, and then we joined this Family Bridges workshop. Then we learn how to make a budget, how to start saving. That's something new for us, actually for me. And everything started coming up better through this workshop. And we start having like healthy relation in between my wife and myself, and both with the money, because now we know how to handle the money. And we went from the bankruptcy on starting a process of buying a house. Also with this situation, with the pandemic, we just slowed down, and we're more taking more precautions on how to handle the money. And well, God is good, and today, actually, I'm so happy for my family, and I have to thank you a lot to Family Bridges for all the help that they provide for my family. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Victor. That's wonderful. We're going to hear from Regina now.
Yes, thank you, Victor, for sharing your story. It was extremely touching. Hi, everyone. I'm Regina Madigan. I'm on the board of Family Bridges on the finance committee, and I'm involved because of the work that we do around education and communication to promote healthy marriages and families. This morning, you've heard how Family Bridges is responding to the pandemic and met some wonderful people. Now it's my privilege to ask you to make a financial investment to support our work with families. This is not just an investment in helping needy families, it truly is an investment in our own futures. And I believe it's one of the most important investments that any of us can make. We all benefit when families in our community are healthy and strong. One way you can help is with a monthly gift of $15 per month. One example of how Family Bridges would use your gift is to love a family in a very practical way by sending each of their children a STEM kit every month for 6 months. Each kit will give the kids several hours of joy because it's full of stimulating educational activities that inspire their creativity. All that for $15 a month or $30 a month would support kits for 2 children. We are very excited, in addition, to announce a generous leadership gift of $5,000 from John Orlando and Epic Solutions to provide STEM kits for 55 kids. We also have received a dollar-for-dollar match from an anonymous donor for any amount you set up as a monthly gift. So with your help, we can actually reach twice as many kids. This is really an exciting option that we have. The second option is to support an Avance chapter at a church. In this crisis, we've been amazed by the huge response of our Avance volunteers helping their communities. They've stepped up in so many ways to feed the hungry, sew and distribute masks, calm down people upset by recent looting and violence. They tell us the leadership training they received through Avance made the difference in how they attack the problems and work together as a team. With your gift of $200 a month, we can bring Avance to more churches. The last opportunity is to support the growth of Family Bridges infrastructure. We're expanding services to reach more people online. So far, we've raised $80,000 of the $200,000 we need to scale our e-learning model. Your gift of $5,000 could help us close that gap and grow our reach. And don't forget that any monthly gift would be matched dollar for dollar, also in this case. Although I listed only 3 options, we know and respect that you may prefer to give at a different level or even not at all today. That's fine. We truly appreciate your presence here with us, and I hope you enjoyed the program. I know I learned a lot. And even if giving is not something you can do today, we hope you'll join us for future Bridges XL webinars or at our November storytelling events. Thank you again for your attention, and I'll turn the program back over to Norma.
Thank you so much, Regina, for sharing that information and the different options that people can that have to give. I'm just reading all the congratulations to Victor from friends. In case you're not reading that, Victor, everybody's so happy for you, for what's going on and what's happening with your life. And thanks to organizations like Family Bridges, we can have those type of stories, and we love them. Alex Quesada said from the beginning he was so happy to hear from you and a few other people, Rudy Gonzalez. So it is stories like that that makes a difference. This wraps up our program, but I really want to encourage everyone to take the time to give, to take the time to donate, to take the time to go to our website, and before you start the business of the day, to take the time to support programs that you heard about through the Family Bridges organization. And we hope to hear more testimonials like that. Thank you, Chris and Dr. Niederjohn, for the insightful information. The information is going to stay on your screen. The donation link will stay on your screen for a few minutes before we close it. But you can always go to the website and learn more about it. You don't have to just do it today. You can do it throughout the year and share the different events that we'll have the rest of the year as well. We hope to see you again all soon. Thank you for your participation.